Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with Paul Fricker the other day. He's a very talented writer who has worked with Chaosium for a long time, and he gave us a sneak preview into the Rivers of London RPG, which he is involved with working on. This interview is going to start in just a moment, but first, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the Chaosium YouTube channel. It helps us a lot, and it lets us make more content like this. Thanks.
The thing that's been taking up the most time just recently is not Call of Cthulhu. It's been Rivers of London, which is a new game that we're working on in Chaosium based on the books Rivers of London of the same name by Ben Aronovich, based around magic and investigation in London.
So, how did you come across the Rivers of London project? Did you know about it before you signed on with Chaosium to write this RPG? Were you already a fan of the series?
Friend of mine recommended the books to my wife and she started reading them, and then I started reading them, and then the project came up. Mike mentioned it to me, and yeah, it kind of evolved, and I got on board with it.
So, for somebody who doesn't know about Rivers of London, if you had to, Call of Cthulhu is Eldritch Horror, RuneQuest is Bronze Age fantasy, how would you sell Rivers of London to people? What can they expect?
Okay, so it's modern day investigation. The characters often have magic and they're investigating urban horror and some fantastical creatures and fairy and all of those great things.
It's exciting. Can you tell us about the system the game's going to be using, what players might expect as they jump into it?
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting that Ben Aronovich, the author, he was very keen on BRP. So he loves Call of Cthulhu and the associated BRP games. And he's got a long history of role playing. And he wanted the Rivers of London game to use the BRP engine. So basically, when writing the rules, I looked at Call of Cthulhu. Rivers of London is a very investigative novel. So we based it on Call of Cthulhu and tried to strip it back a bit more, even more, to make it more accessible and easier and faster to play.
Speaking of BRP and Call of Cthulhu in general, how did you come across the BRP game system in general? What was your pathway into Call of Cthulhu and the BRP role playing scene?
I guess my first encounter with it was in the old White Dwarf magazines, the Games Workshop magazines in the early 80s. And I would encounter these things and it'd say Call of Cthulhu. And I think, what's that? I only know like Dungeons and Dragons and so on. A friend introduced or suggested we play some Call of Cthulhu, and I picked up a copy. And that was my introduction, reading through, I think it was like second edition, something like that. It was quite a slim book, and I read through that and I was really excited by it. I ran the scenario paper chase for my friend Phil and, haven't looked back.
Do you think that someone who picks up the new edition of Rivers of London when it comes out is going to have a substantially different experience jumping into the game than you did?
I guess what's different is there's a lot more choice out there now. Even in like 87, in the mid 80s, there was a big choice of role playing games, but there weren't too many that actually gave you the opportunity to play what are ostensibly like real world people in the modern day real world setting. It was more, fantasy and sci-fi and things like that. I think the thing that caught my imagination was the fact that, I can just be a guy a bit like me, or I can be a librarian, or I can be, whatever, just a regular person. And there's a lot more games that do that now. So how people get on board with it, I think that's the main thing, is there's a bigger choice.
What drew you towards the Call of Cthulhu RPG originally?
The system, the simplicity of the system and the aim of the system. There were certain things in the game that I really liked. I really liked, although it doesn't factor in that much because of the way that the mechanics work, I really liked the fact that the more you learn about the Cthulhu mythos, the more that erodes your sanity. So, and there's a direct correlation in that. So if you've got 10% Cthulhu mythos skill, your maximum sanity is down to like 99 minus that. So it's down to 89. So the more you learn about the true nature of the universe, the lower your maximum sanity becomes. Somehow that just really captured my imagination, that simple mechanic. Yeah. I mean, it's very rare that actually you get that much Cthulhu mythos that actually has an impact, but just that kind of caught my imagination. And I was also this was the first time I was getting to read Lovecraft as well, exactly at that same time. I was exposed to both at the same time, and they kind of cross-pollinated. That and my circle of friends being into that, it just was a kind of perfect storm, really, that took me into that area. And there was nothing else, to my knowledge, that was really covering that. I'd played 1 or 2 other horror games, but nothing really. They tended to be more generic. And whilst part of the appeal to me is with Call of Cthulhu is you can be quite generic, you can do all sorts of different things. At its core, has got a definite feel to it.